Hello, Psych 100 students. We're on to Chapter 7. What do you folks think of this chapter, Chapter 7? I'm a little biased because 7 is my favorite number. The topic at hand is thinking and intelligence. We've got, of course, Rodin's the great thinker right there. I feel like this is one of the most controversial chapters we're going to cover, and I'll talk about why in just a minute. Let's start off with thinking, right? Mental manipulation of representations of information we encounter in our environment. Oh my gosh, if somebody asks us the definition, could we come up with that definition off the top of our head? That's a great definition. We're always thinking. We're thinking right now about this video and saying, oh my God, I'm tired of these videos. Stop. Lots of people think. Everybody thinks. But some of us are accused of not thinking it through, so to speak. But one of the key things here is intelligence. How do we demonstrate intelligence? The ability to use knowledge to reason, make decisions, make sense of events, solve problems, understand complex ideas, learn quickly, and adapt to environmental challenges. Oh my goodness, what a mouthful. You have to have intelligence just to remember all this information. But intelligence is a tricky thing because primarily we have tried to design tests that were so-called culture-free. For example, in the book, The Normal Curve, controversy was raised based on the publication of this book that said that some cultures are more intelligent than other cultures. And people are saying, well, what about the test? What kind of tests were you given to these individuals, right? So let me give an example of how this works. Let's suppose I'm doing an intelligence test and I show you this image and I ask you, what is this image? And some of you say, well, it's a red dot. And some of you say, oh, it's one of my dice. Oh, it's the sun. Oh, it's a rubber ball, the kind that you have on those paddles. Oh, it's the Japanese flag. Who gets the correct answer? Do you think that culture might have represented how you responded to that issue? Of course it does. So even in our attempts to make so-called culture-free tests, we haven't always been successful. Not at all. Let me ask you these questions. Why does night fall but never break, and day break but never fall? Why can't homework be done in school? Why are tomboys girls? Why does quicksand work slowly? Why are boxing rings square? Why can a man father a movement, but a woman can't mother one? These are just weird stuff, right? Why can your nose run and your feet smell? Well, things to ponder. I'd like to talk about why this is a controversial topic, because in psychology, we have a formula that translates to how we measure intelligence, right? I got a formula here somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. Basically, IQ, which stands for, as you know, intelligence quotient, equals equals CA over MA times 100. So if you get a IQ score, your average IQ score is approximately, I had it right the first time, mental age over chronological age times 100. If you get an IQ score of between 90 and 110, depending on the assessment, you're considered average. I've done psychological testing for individuals, IQ tests specifically, and they scored 100, and they're like, "Yeah, high five me." And it's like, okay, well, that's where you're supposed to be. You come with above 110, then I'll high five you. If you come below 69, then I'll have to low five you and find out what's going on. Right? I have a different formula for IQ that I don't think it's found in any textbook. And if I ever write my own textbook, I'd probably include this definition. IQ equals the S with the two lines running through it. And what do I mean by that? Anybody have an idea? What do I mean, the S with the two lines running through it? Well, essentially what I mean is this image right here. Very good image, I might say, but we see in this image right here, it appears to be a door, and the door is closed. In this image over here, the door is open. That's what I'm referring to. I'm referring more to just a door. I'm referring to opportunity, because numbers are important. Some of us are assigned numbers, student numbers, social security numbers, driver's license numbers. Those numbers are important. Your math teacher probably said it's all about numbers. Well, in some ways, they're right. When it comes to IQ scores or SAT scores or ACT scores or GRE scores or LSAT scores, those scores determine if the door is open or closed. So opportunities. How many of us have met bright people but didn't really make it that far through school? How many people who have college degrees, they're not very bright at all? We have different skills. So let me tell you about the history of our intelligence testing. And we're going to start off with a test called the Army Alpha Test. Now I have a sample here of a general information test that was part of the sample Army Alpha Test. And they ask you questions like, the apple grows on a shrub, vine, bush, tree, right? Or they might ask you, Christy Mathewson is a famous writer, artist, baseball player, comedian. Carrie Nation is known as a singer, temperance agitator, suffragist, or nurse. I'm looking around because I have something that reminds me of Carrie Nation around here somewhere. Where it is, I can't find it at this moment. I'll look for it later. Well, a little history about the Army Alpha Test. This test was designed quite some time ago, and people that take that particular test today don't usually score very well on it, even though some of the questions you might have known the answer. So let me tell you the history of this test. On April 6, 1917, the day President Woodrow Wilson signed a declaration of war and the United States entered which war? 1917? It's not a history class, don't worry. World War I, which at the time was called the Great War. The war to end all wars was so horrible, they said we'll never have another war after that. It's good to know history. I know a lot of you don't like history, but sure is important to know history. The Society of Experimental Psychologists was meeting at Harvard, where you can go visit Phineas Gage, but not on Harvard's campus. Remember that, the Warren Museum. They decided to concentrate on developing methods of psychological examination specifically adapted to military needs. On December 24th, the Surgeon General ordered that the psychological examining be extended to the entire Army and that all newly drafted and enlisted men be tested. Now, they're going to test a bunch of men in the Army and a bunch of men drafted into the Army. And I don't know if you guys know what drafted means, but essentially, if you're within a certain age group and you're male, and now possibly female these days, you don't have a choice. They're going to just force you to be in the Army, assuming you pass the physical and you don't have any, medical issues like bone spurs, things of that nature. So they're going to test a lot of people. So they had to design a test that had a following criteria. It had to be a group test. Lots of people to test at the same time. The test was to measure native wit and be as independent as possible of schooling. That one's debatable, as you'll see. The test was to be steeply graded in difficulty, hard enough to tax men of high intelligence, but easy enough to be taken by those of lesser ability. They recognize there's going to be a wide range of education in the ranks. The test could not take more than an hour to administer, and it'd be simple to score objectively. Now, when they went to give this test, they found that 40% of the inductees could not even take this test. Do you have an idea why? They couldn't read. They couldn't either read English, because we had a lot of, this is a country of, besides our native people, this is a country of immigrants, right? We forget that, right? Or they couldn't read at all, right? So they had to design a separate test that relied less on verbal skills, right? And they call that the Army Beta test. So here's some of the subtests that you would be experiencing if you took the Army Alpha test or the Army Beta test, right? The Army Beta test, as you notice, has a lot of puzzles and numbers and things of that nature, whereas the Army Alpha test, which includes general information, which is this assessment I just showed you, has a lot of verbal skills involved. So when my students have taken this test in the classroom, they've done pretty poorly, and we've come to the realization that they suffer from generational bias, right? Generational bias. And why do I call it generational bias? Well, primarily because these tests, like the question about Christine Mathewson, are pretty old. They're ancient history. Christine Mathewson, the only reason I know who that is because I happened to watch Ken Burns' documentary on baseball. And Christy Mathewson was a sensational pitcher in the Hall of Fame. Right? He had a song about him. Just a remarkable fella, right? So we decided that most students score poorly today because 1917 questions are more current to that time period, right? Yet, when they gave this assessment, we would assume that those men who are from that time period would score much better than we would, right? And what they quickly found was that the test produced some surprising results. Let me tell you. How intelligent is the Army? They concluded, this is from Yerkes 1921, page 785, quote, it appears that the intelligence of the principal sample of the draft, when transmuted from alpha and beta examinations into terms of mental age, is about 13 years, 13.08. If this definition of moron, which, by the way, as an aside, was the technical term, we would say intellectually deficient back then, the technical term was moron, is interpreted as anyone with a mental age of less than 13 years, as has recently been done, then almost half of the draft, 47.3%, would have been morons. Thus it appears that feeble-mindedness, as of present defined, is of much greater frequency of occurrence than had previously been supposed. Average mental age, 13.08. Keep in mind these are adults taking this assessment. 47.3% failed or fell into the moron stage. And so I believe that in their time period, they suffered from educational bias. These men, if they scored poorly, had to go to the front lines. So not only did a number determine what type of job they had in the military, but it might have determined how long they lived. If you were fortunate to have more education, you would probably go into officer training, right? So numbers, in this case, could be a life and death sentence. Is the world fair? No, it sure isn't. We'll continue with the controversy of numbers and intelligence and thinking next time.